Seems like it's a good weekend of official visits on Montlake.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Lars, quick housekeeping note here right off the top. We are, as we, move into the months of June, July, we are moving into our off season here over at Locked On. And so we are going to be cutting back from 5 shows a week to 3. Right now, we're planning on doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday as when we're going to be releasing shows, but it might be subject to change a little bit depending on when news drops, other things like that. So just keep right here on Locked On Huskies. And the best way to make sure you keep up to date on everything that we're doing is just subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So make sure you just click that subscribe button and click that little bell if you're watching us on YouTube, as it does. Just make sure that it notifies you every time we post a new video. And Lars, with that being said, Washington's big weekend of official visits, we spent a lot of time talking about it last week, has come to an end, and we haven't seen any commits just yet as we record this at 4:00 in the afternoon on Sunday, but it seems like it was a positive weekend overall, at least.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we did kind of hint at it going into the weekend, where with some of these guys, you look at the amount of 4-stars that were on campus. Yes, in a way they have to close, but it's somewhat in a way unrealistic to expect them to do that this weekend, because one thing you want to consider is you want the commitment to stick. You want the commitment to not have it be where, in a couple of weeks when I go, I'll commit, but I still want to visit my other 4 schools before really locking in my decision. It's like, well, then you're not really committed. Like, it's a good sign that you like us enough to want to commit, but if you still want to take your other official visits, which, by the way, as the staff will say, you're more than happy to do, it just means, okay, now we can't really take your commitment until those other 3 visits are wrapped up. So that's where some of these guys kind of stand. But either way, the whole importance of this weekend was getting in position to close. This is not necessarily the greatest analogy, but it's like the final couple of laps of a NASCAR race, where as long as you're in the top 5, you can kind of get in position to be there. But you can't do that if you're not in the top 5. So you have to get them on campus. You have to be in position to close in order to then either close on later this week, like we said, by Wednesday, or in the end of June after some of these other official visits have wrapped up. But either way, it's about getting the premier talent on campus and letting them choose when they want to commit versus just trying to get the talent in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things where I know you posted it on over on Twitter that like Smith and Rogbo changed his profile picture to him wearing Steve Belichick's Super Bowl rings, which is cool. You love to see stuff like that. I wish I could do that personally, but do you have something? Go ahead. Sorry.
I did have a question about that, and you would be perfect to ask more than anybody. And actually, Smith and Rogbo posted a Instagram story saying at Patriots with 4 Super Bowl rings. Correct me if I'm wrong. Steve Belichick only has 3. Or did he get a 4th?
He's got 3. Depending on when Vinny Sunseri joined the staff, like if he joined like maybe late 2019, like after the Alabama run, maybe he gets one for it. I was wondering that myself.
That. Because technically I want to be accurate here.
Right. No, but that was something I was wondering myself. Maybe one of them is like an AFC championship or something like that. It was kind of hard to tell, but the Huskies pull out all the stops. They did all the best possible things with that they could. I mean, we saw that they do like an annual seafood boil dinner sort of thing. They get a ride on a yacht. There are a whole lot of cool things that go on over the course of the weekend. And it's all just about that sales pitch. It was a good weekend to do that before all the rain kind of started coming in on Sunday. But one of the things about it, as Lars, as you and I discussed all week, it was about just getting a nice first swing in, as you just said. Where when we look at, Darius Dixon is a name that stands out to me right off the top, where Dash Beerley posted a picture of him, Washington's quarterback, one of Washington's 2 quarterback commits actually, posted a picture with his teammate who's a top 100 recruit cornerback. And he's got visits lined up to Penn State and Tennessee over the next couple of weeks. And for a kid that's been from the West Coast, lived on the West Coast his whole life, you want to make sure that you take those visits for the most part before you make your decision. Washington could end up still securing a commitment from a guy like that and getting a nice first swing in and just making a strong impact where, instead of going to Penn State and going to Tennessee and then coming to Washington, you just have that lasting. I feel like the best term to use is other coaching staffs now have to wash you off of, oh yeah, at Washington, we saw all these really nice things. We saw what they were building. I got to hold these Super Bowl rings and, they were just in the national championship. There are a whole lot of things that, UW can sell. And now it's just a matter of making sure that you can hold on through that. So I don't know. It feels like it was the right way to go about it, even though it might be a little bit of a disappointment to fans that there aren't any commits just yet. It still seems like it was just a strong weekend overall.
It really was. I mean, I'm looking at this one photo that Jake Flores, one of UW's offensive line commits, or the one UW offensive, I should say right now, technically, the one offensive line commit that UW has, to be clear, because we are recording this when a couple of these other guys could jump in the boat. He uploaded a photo of John. I don't know. I want to say is John Mills the one on the right, the one that kind of has the wavy-ish hair to the right of Demitri.
Yeah, that's John Mills.
By the way, okay, because by the way, there's two takeaways that I have, and I'm going to do this is like live instant analysis, if you will, for the people or for the everydayers here. Does John Mills, the way he smiled in all those photos, does he already not look like he's locked in with the Huskies? Like he seems like a guy who's pretty. He's a guy that's going to be, as you mentioned, where he's got a couple of visits. He got a visit to Texas coming up. There's some other ones that they're going to have to stem off, but he certainly looks like he had a good time on campus. And then the one to his left, Demitri Manning, looks natural in purple and gold. So another guy who's got a visit to Oregon, Miami. Again, that's kind of where the crux of the situation comes in, where we both thought, there might be a couple of commits to come from this weekend. That could still very well be the case, but it just won't come right now. These will be guys, hey, Demitri Manning, after his visit to, Miami or Cal or Oregon, wherever you want to say he's visiting, in a couple of weeks from now, okay, you know what? I don't need to take my last two visits. It's Washington versus Oregon, or it's Washington versus Miami, or in the case of John Mills, it's Washington versus Texas, or Washington versus Cal, or Florida, or one of those schools where they don't take all of them, but that doesn't also mean you're getting that commitment either, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're in a bad spot because they don't commit. There's that's why it's kind of worth noting for the everydayers. Hey, you could very well have 4 or 5 commits from this weekend that don't commit until 2 or 3 weeks from now, after some of their other visits have taken place.
I will say one term we will not use is silent commit. We will not be using that term in any way, shape, or form, because that's a whole different issue. And, we've seen that go sideways many a time before, but it's one of these things where the sales pitch seems very strong and we want to withhold just saying, oh, well, it was a failure, where, if we get to, let's just say June 15th, 16th, and let's say 7 of the 16 visitors have committed to one school or another, and maybe 2 of them are at Washington, then maybe things start to get a little dicey. But right now you can't make that assessment. Right now you can't make that judgment, because it's just about making sure that you make that strong first impression, which is what this coaching staff appears to have done. And Lars, with that being said, maybe we'll get 1 or 2 commitments this week. And we'll get the random message from our good friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role in any given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn knows that small businesses wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So Lars, we just spent a lot of time talking about the sales pitch, talking about how right now, it's okay to not have any pledges from the weekend. but I have a feeling we'll probably see one or two by the end of the week. And the one I really want to start with is 3-star edge rusher Devin Hyde at a Menlo Park, Menlo Atherton High School in California, because this is a guy who he's still got one more visit, but he seems like a guy who won't wait too much longer to secure a spot and would be a really nice start for Washington on the defensive side, where all 5 commits right now are offensive players.
Right. And in a way, it makes sense that Jedd Fisch, as an offensive-minded coach, would lead with the offense. That's not necessarily a cause for concern, especially when you consider his defensive coordinator wasn't in college until January or February. Actually, let's be real, probably early February. But I was going to say, so he didn't even have that winter eval period to work off of. So the one thing that does kind of bring to mind with that late start that Steve Belichick had is he's gotten Devin Hyde on campus many times. He's been around him. Yeah. They had him up for camp on an unofficial visit in April. And it seems like they obviously knew who they wanted to identify, where we've seen a number of offers go out early, both in the 25 and 26 class in February and March and April. And then they started to get some of these guys around. So in a way, the calendar for the defensive side is a little bit more kicked back, but it's also in a way backlogged. So now once we get into the May, June, July period, where not necessarily July, but August, you can see some decisions coming in as well from guys who want to wait before the start of the season, take a couple of unofficial visits in camp and things like that. But Devin Hyde is, I agree, the perfect example of a guy who's been around the program enough, that edge position. You can never – one thing Jedd has said both at Arizona and Washington, you can never have enough edge rushers. I think in any level of football, that's absolutely true, where if you have a talented edge rusher and when you look at his frame, I could see him just being a natural fit in that position with Jason Kafusi and what Steve Belichick wants to do. And it also doesn't hinder any of those other guys where we can talk about Smith Orogbo potentially, as a 4-star out of Texas, where I'm not saying he would commit, but it doesn't hinder any of those higher targets that you have on the board by taking a guy who could be a good depth piece that ends up potentially being a contributor down the line.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing where, you look up and down this list of visitors and he just seems like one of the guys who would be most likely to jump in the boat just thanks to his long relationship with the school. And I know this is something we talked about last week, but it's still something you want to keep an eye on because you want to see those first signs of momentum. And that would be a nice place to start, where he's just somebody that when you look at him, it's like, yeah, this is one of those projectable bodies who you leave him in the system for a year or two. Maybe he doesn't play right away with a whole bunch of guys in front of him. The Lance Holtzclaws, the Isaiah Wards, the Jacob Lanes of the world. But, you're looking at him as, redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore. It's all of a sudden, oh yeah, like Devin Hyde was a really underrated pickup in the 2025 class, something that, you're looking at with this coaching staff, just in terms of how it's been able to develop over its time. And then, another guy, as I kind of look through this list, is I know you mentioned a little earlier, I want to keep an eye on John Mills, but the guy I keep coming back to is Madden Faraimo, where, I don't know, there's just something about the way that Robert Ball has been recruiting that this one might take a couple of weeks to just kind of figure out, where, if I had to choose between him and Matai Tagoa'i, saying you can only get one or the other, that's a real toss-up, where I really, really love both players on film. But there's something about Madden Faraimo's just physicality and just the way his body is already developed at the high school level, where I know we talked about with Brian Smith last week, that I could see him stepping in and playing right away at the college level. And with the way Robert Balla has just been so involved in his recruitment for so long now, and just the way that he would be deployed in this defense, I have a feeling this is one of those guys where the more I look at it with having Jake Flores as a peer recruiter, since they play together at J. Sarah, it's one of those guys where, it might be considered an upset for Washington to pull off his commitment. But if they get it, I can't say it would be the most surprising thing in the world either.
I don't disagree. I just think it'll be flipped in terms of, ironically, no pun intended there, with Matai Tagoa'i coming up as a USC commit. For me, it kind of screams you take the flip first, and then if you're Madden Faraimo, you're thinking, oh, wow, this guy was committed to USC, initially like Washington, commits to USC, and then decides, no, you know what, I actually want to end up at Washington instead. As a fellow, another Southern California guy, you can look at that and say, ooh, okay, now I have even a lot more to think about. And he was up on the same weekend. And it would honestly kind of be a pretty big message from Steve Belichick and the defensive staff to say, you know what? Yeah, just like I was saying, we started late, but we can catch up pretty quickly. And then you look at, some of the other guys in the class, that's how the dominoes start to fall. I would be more surprised if Madden went first, just because as an uncommitted guy, he's got a couple more visits to take. Whereas Tagoa'i, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if he has any other visits scheduled besides Washington.
He does. He's got 2 more. He's visiting Texas, and then he's also going to be visiting USC in a couple of weeks as well.
And so that's one where, okay, with USC getting that last visit, how solid is that commitment? Could that visit be one where we saw, like we saw last season, where some of those guys in that late recruiting window in June ended up canceling that last visit because they didn't make it there, which in this case would bode well for Washington. Could you then keep him away from Texas? I think really, I mean, we might have to do a whole show at some point later this week or in the coming weeks about the battle that Washington has against Steve Sarkisian in Texas, because the amount of guys that are both considering Texas and Washington, it's just from this weekend alone, Dijon Lee, John Mills,
Matai Tagoa'i,
Matai Tagoa'i, and then I would not be so. I know Chase Rice had an offer from Texas. Smith Orogbo, another one, has a crystal ball to Texas. So I'm fascinated by that, given how that game has turned out on the field the last 2 years, albeit under a different coaching staff. And now Texas is going to the SEC, Washington going to the Big Ten. It would be cool. We won't see it, but with all these schools doing these recruiting battles, it'd be kind of nice to have maybe every now and then home and home series every 2 or 3 years with somebody between these schools to back up what you can do on the recruiting trail.
Absolutely. And so this is one of the things I wanted to get into when talking about the guys that could commit soon. And just when we look at what this class could be by the end of this month, the one thing I'm really curious about is just how this is going to look for Washington's coaching staff, because Jedd Fisch has called them just relentless recruiters, saying that that's what the staff is going to be known for their ability to recruit. And they've done a really good job at this point, getting these guys on campus, getting some of these early commitments from some of these really, really talented prospects. But now it's a matter of just adding to it. And it's a matter of, just like staying true to your word and getting some of these high 4 stars and getting some of these top 100 guys, because that's something that's a really important part of this. But the more I look at the staff, the more I see that they have a bunch of guys that can certainly close on these talented prospects. And that's what I'm going to be just looking at over these next couple of weeks with whoever it is that does commit, whether it is, a Madden Faraimo, a Matai Tagoa'i, a Devin Hyde, it's all right, which position coach, whether it be Robert Bala, Vinny Sunseri, John Richardson, Kevin Cummings, Scotty Graham, Jordan Paopao, whoever it might be, that's closing on these guys first. Just saying, okay, we see 3 linebackers in a week. That would certainly bode well for Robert Bala. Or Vinny Sunseri gets a couple of safeties in the span of 2 weeks. Something like that. That's what I'm really, really intrigued by, because it seems like Jedd Fisch has built a really solid coaching staff, both on the recruiting trail and on the field. But going into the Big Ten, this is the reason we've been stressing recruiting, is we saw what happened against a Big Ten team that was consistently in the top 5 in recruiting rankings. Is it everything? No. And we've said that on the show before. But does it certainly account for something? Absolutely. Because Washington's developed a whole lot of 3-star guys. They also had 2, top 200 prospects that played tackle in that game. And Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan, who are both 4-star receivers. Like it's not everything, but it's certainly something. And with this first full recruiting class, Jedd Fisch has a chance to truly prove something, that the staff is here to compete, and maybe not in 2024, but down the line compete for Big Ten championships.
Yeah, exactly. And the only way to do that is to start early. And we saw that when he was down in Arizona, where when you look at that 22 class, I believe, where 22 or 23, whichever one it was, that had Jonah Coleman, Noah Fafita, Tetero McMillan. The list goes on of the guys, or 22, the guys that now were contributors to that 10-win season last year. That's how you build it in high school recruiting. So you have to start early, where, yes, he's also getting a good start. And we can talk about it later in the summer about the 26 class and even to a degree the 27 class. But everything right away off the bat has to start with 25 class. And we see the importance go on both sides of the ball. And that's also a good sign, too, where Jedd Fisch knows, hey, I can have a great offense, but unlike my predecessor, we do also need to have a really good defense that starts from within and not just supplemented through the portal every single year.
Absolutely. And that's one of the curious things when it comes to just the Big Ten, where that's another thing that Jedd Fisch has stressed, where, we're going to build through high school recruiting and just supplement through the transfer portal, where these are all big promises that he's made. We've talked a lot about how he is a guy that likes to set these lofty goals and likes to have really, really high expectations for himself, which is great, which is exactly what you want to see. But it's just a matter of, okay, how much is he going to achieve in year 1? and how much of it can play off his success at Arizona, which is extremely impressive. And we know that, but how much of it is going to come from him actually having to send a message at Washington before, some of this comes through. And Lars, speaking of just Washington in general, we got to just get to some of the other wins from around UW athletics. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, because it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 spent on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And I mean, hey, I got to say it. It's finals time. It's Celtics Mavs. One thing that I'd be looking at really early on is I kind of like some of the Kyrie unders in this series, especially when you go and you look at the game one numbers, where I love the matchup that Boston's guards have against Kyrie Irving with Drew Holiday, with Derek White, who are two of the best defenders in the NBA. And Kyrie's had some problems in Boston previously in terms of coming back with the Nets and everything. So with game one coming up on Thursday, I might slam some of those Kyrie unders on FanDuel. So, Lars, right off the bat here, I want to give a shout out to some of our everydayers where they've been saying, hey, well, you got to look into this a little bit more. You got to look into that. And why haven't you guys talked about this? We love hearing that. We love hearing, oh, hey, we'd love to hear some more about women's basketball, some more about softball, some more about all these things. And it's great. And we wanted to make sure that we spent a little bit of time on it. And Tina Langley and women's basketball certainly deserve some respect for pulling out the commitment from 5-star Brynn McGaughy, who's from Colfax, Washington, and picked Washington over a whole bunch of big-time schools. And one of the best things about her recruitment was reading the story that was published on 247 Sports, where they interviewed her just following her commitment. And the first thing she said was, I really wasn't thinking about staying home, and I didn't have any intentions to come to Washington until my official visit. And that is credit to Tina Langley and just everything that her program is doing, where it was in a really, really bad spot since she took over. And it certainly seems to be building something special. And this could be a really, really nice get for her.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad you mentioned that 247 story, because as I wrote on Athlon Sports the day that she committed, the other intriguing part to this equation was one of the hosts that she had, who's now going to be a freshman this year, is Dan Coppinger, who also is from the state of Washington. And now granted, wasn't necessarily as highly rated as Brynn McGaughy, but it showed, hey, Tina Langley, again, Washington fans, whatever sports you want to say, when it comes to recruiting the state of Washington, this is what you want to see. You have top in-state players, whether they're on the east side of the state or not. And I remember trying to explain to you where Colfax is. If you couldn't,
no clue.
You couldn't get,
still couldn't tell you.
You couldn't get any closer to the Idaho. Well, you could. There's one town over that you could get closer to the Idaho border, but Washington fans don't want to really acknowledge that town, which I understand. But with that being said, to go all the way out, to the middle of nowhere in Eastern Washington and get somebody who did not want to stay home speaks volumes to Tina Langley, who's just, I believe, year 3 or 4 on the job now at Washington?
Yeah.
This I believe this will be her 4th year, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless of how it shows the importance of going and making and having those national recruiting battles, which no matter what sport you want to talk about. And the ironic part of this is, people have made the argument, oh, it's going to be harder for players to travel and things like that. Well, if you're Brynn McGaughy, you could have gone to Duke or North Carolina or Iowa or whatever, and travel is still going to be crazy no matter what. The life of an athlete who happens to be in college, because I refuse to acknowledge the former name that the NCAA used to try and just jam down everyone's throats, which I'm going to say, there's sacrifices that have to be made. And for Tina Langley to get her to stay home and not play for Carol Lawson at Duke, and not following Caitlin Clark's, even though she's a forward, not following Caitlin Clark's footsteps at Iowa and following that national limelight and everything that has to go with that. Where another thing to consider is Iowa just lost their women's basketball coach, where I believe she retired after over a decade in Iowa City. So with Tina Langley being still fresh on at Washington and making that steady progress, it's proof of the pudding for what she's doing on the court. It's paying off in recruiting.
Absolutely. And real quick, because Lars, I'm not going to begin to act like I know a whole bunch about rowing, but you got to give a shout out to both men's and women's teams, and especially Coach Michael Callahan, who won his 12th Pac-12 Coach of the Year honor, which is unbelievable as Washington's men swept the ICA national championships this weekend to bring home the program's 20th national championship. Really cool there for the boys in the boat. But Lars, one of the reasons you and I want to talk about just UW athletics as a whole is something I wrote about a little bit over on Huskies Wire is UW's director of creative services, Kasey Byers, who won a local Emmy award over the weekend for his cinematic recap of Washington versus Oregon. And something that I truly I'm really intrigued by, as somebody who grew up with family that works in television and everything like that, is just the way that Kasey Byers, especially since he came into this program after Chris Peterson was not the biggest advocate of social media. He was not the biggest advocate of marketing as a whole, really. Let's be real here. But one of the coolest things about what Kasey has done is he's come in and not just revamped Washington's creative team and put a truly fantastic team in place, but he's put them on the forefront of just social media marketing as a whole with just some of the things he's doing, like the photo shoot at the Museum of Flight for the chrome Husky royalty jerseys that they wore against Arizona State. We won't get into the game itself, but when you think about that, you think of the Museum of Pop Culture thing, and just it all kind of came to a head where I've watched that Made for This Moment video that he won the Emmy for probably about 100 times, because it's just such a fantastic video, and he does such an amazing job in the entire team. Again, I don't want to just say that it was just him, because he's a fantastic team around him. They were the first people that he credited with this award. But it's just really cool to see how he might be able to continue to push Washington and push the marketing aspect of all this as the Huskies move into the Big Ten, because it really is an important thing.
It's funny you mentioned the whole Chris Peterson tie-in with that, because I remember writing in 2019, September, October 2019, back when I worked with Rivals, Chris Peterson had to evolve in order for the UW football program to grow. That was the headline of the story. And ever since then, in a way, he did evolve. Where, to your point, Chris Peterson, he might push back on that, because in a way, in several ways, he did elevate the program. He did shine attention to it, but not in the way that Kasey Byers does, with just such a creative. And I think, honestly, Chris Peterson would be one of the first to say, I wish I had Kasey. I wish we could have done that, because I think it was done very much in an image that Chris Peterson likes, where it's cinematic, it's special. It's not just, oh, this is, like players screaming into a camera. There's so many. I'm glad we're getting to talk about Kasey, because it's cool to always just watch him walk the sidelines. He's got a headphone on, got the camera dialed in already. And you can just, when we see him work, at least when I see him work, and then you see the final product, it's really cool, because he's a guy where he puts so much time and effort into it, and every little shot makes sense. And even the small little things he's done with the other UW things that didn't win an Emmy, but in terms of, like, he'll put a camera in a helmet that I know Skylar Lynn had at the spring game, and things like that, where just these little details in this new era of college football that not necessarily is ever going to win a recruiting battle, in terms of no kid's ever going to say, you know what, that creative. But in a way, it's like when a kid says that place is special, everything about that is special. Those little details go into making it special. It's the, Kaylin having the snacks and questions after practice under Allie, in terms of her nutrition question. There's all these little things that just break up the monotony of, oh, great, I'm on camera. It's like, yeah, no, but I'm with you, Dub. You're having fun. This is a great opportunity. And really, Kasey does bring kind of the unique, cool parts out of every player whenever he does something. And it's like a fly that you want to be able to see, but it doesn't impact the situation, where it's not about the flash and the clicks. It's just about, hey, I wish I could have been there for that. Well, here's what it would have looked like had you been one of those players in that team meeting room, in the lead up to that game, on the sidelines, that sort of thing. And, without question, Kasey deserves all the flowers that he gets.
Oh, 100%. And that's something where, just looking at some of the other stuff that we've seen over the weekend, where Sean Vergara, former UW walk-on DB, was on campus, where he's a really talented artist, does a whole lot of stuff with that, and it looked like he was on campus to help be part of the official visits in terms of making some backgrounds or some sets for a photo shoot, which we haven't really seen much of yet, but that'd be a really cool thing, where that's just another awesome special part of that. Where, Lars, one of the things you said, I certainly don't want to take away from Chris Peterson in any light, but if there's there were a couple of things that I think he certainly could have improved on over his time at Washington. And that was always a big one. When I think about the Jake Browning Heisman campaign, when I think about things like that, And to see it just kind of come as far as it has from where that was to where Kasey Byers is now is so cool. And it's so awesome. Because like you said, when he's walking the sideline, I always just kind of look at him, just kind of like, what's he cooking over there? What's this man cooking? It always seems like there's something fun going on. And it's just cool where to see him recognize the way that he was and to see this whole creative team, which at Washington has taken such a big step forward under his leadership and everything. It's really, really cool to see. And it, like the segment says, it was just a big win for the program as a whole. And Lars, yeah, please, you got something.
And I'd be remiss if we didn't give the biggest double of all to Kelsey Plum.
Yeah, that is a huge W, and we will just leave that one right there. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. Like we said, we're going to be switching to 3 times a week, so we will not be talking to you tomorrow. We'll be talking to you on Wednesday. And until then, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. Make sure you subscribe, hit like on the video, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, drop them right down below in the comment section. If you're audio only, please do a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.